Everybody joining me on the phone right now is Coach Max Howell, Troy Sports Hall of Famer, a longtime college football assistant, Troy, Florida State, Ole Miss, and 25 plus years in sports talk radio. And Coach Howell, it's always good to have you on the show, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Phillip, thank you so much. This is an exciting time for a football coach. I recall vividly as an assistant coach, at this time of the year, we were always looking to see where the next big job opened up because we were going to throw our hat in the ring trying to get a job as an assistant. But that I don't think that's changed much, if you want to know the truth. There's a ton of assistants out there trying to move up the ladder. But I think I just read today 18 official openings over the last 3 or 4 weeks in major college football across the country now. Some of them's already been filled, as we know, but there's still, I think, 12 or 13 of them still open.
And, what's always intriguing to me this time of year is the domino effect. Like, you see the big jobs get filled, and then, the other schools, they have to go somewhere to get their coaches, and just kind of how it impacts everybody throughout the country when these coaching hires start getting made.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. And, of course, those assistants that were, if it would take Napier that came out of Louisiana going to Florida, how many of those guys will he bring with him, or how many does he keep off the current staff there? Those are always big decisions the guy, the coach, the head guy has to make in there. Sometimes he, makes the right choice. Sometimes he's pressured into it, I think. And most of the time, though, my observation is that they'd like to try to keep one or two to kind of hold things together until they become familiar with the system that they're there, whether at the university itself, whether it be recruiting, whether it be the academic side or whatever. Because normally with the early signing period, those guys really don't need to be spending much time in the office. They need to be on the road trying to, finish. Because in a coaching change, you're going to have guys that have committed to the last coach and they're going to decommit and maybe look somewhere else. And then it behooves the new guy coming in to take a look to see if, if he don't know anything about him. Is he good enough to play here? Is this what we're looking for? How about his academic standards? All the things that he needs to feel comfortable with. So it's a full-time job. I mean, 24/7 now. In particular, those coaches that are trying to build a program, if you don't take it very seriously on the recruiting side, those are all the hours that take up your day after the actual coaching the season's over.
Yeah, and you brought up the early signing period, and that's kind of something to me. And it looks like this year you've seen a lot more like in-season, firings, of coaches, and then like that rush now that you want to beat that December date of signing period so you can get a good recruiting class your first go around. Because used to it was just February, that was the day, but now December. Right. So I feel like that puts a lot of pressure on athletic directors and people to find another coach because you kind of do want to hurry up and get somebody in place so you can, salvage some form of recruiting class.
Well, the early signing period, of course, this goes way back before your time. But when I came out of high school, you could sign, if you would go to the SEC, you could sign the first Sunday after Thanksgiving. But see, the difference is the amount of coaches that are changing jobs now as opposed to those days. You didn't get very many, you didn't get 18 coaches changing in 1 year. You may get 2 or 3 or 4, but that's, that was about it. So that is more pressure on the new guy coming in, because how many of those decommitments really need to stay at that commitment program because they thought the last coach thought they were good enough to play there. But the new guy's got his, he's got his chance to reevaluate those guys. But as you just pointed out, the time is not on their side. They got about 3 weeks. And, that's part of me over. And most of the big time 5-star commitments, most years are going to commit that first time to get through with the recruiting process. And there'll be some that'll hang on and wait till the February signing period. But a large majority really want to get it out of the way and make that commitment, go ahead and sign that scholarship and get on with their life.
Quickly, I was going to ask you about, your alma mater, the Troy Trojans. They're going to have a new coach, and it seems like the names mentioned are guys that have been attached to Troy. Maybe some people that worked or played, or especially worked under Neil Brown, or
right.
or played there at Troy. And of course, Chip Lindsey 3 years, went 15-19 after 3 years. What do you think it didn't work there with Chip Lindsey? What do you think was probably the issue there?
I really think. I have not really examined the philosophy of the committee that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. But I haven't coached at that level and fortunate enough in my career to go to the next level as well. Troy would do well. I know that all the ideal situation to find somebody to come in there and stay, 8 to 10 years. But in reality, that's not where it's all about. You may find, get lucky and find a guy that's satisfied with a small town, likes that level of competition, and do well. Most of the guys, though, that are looking to coach at that level first are some of the assistants that were on staffs that got dismissed, this past couple of weeks. I would try to go find me a younger guy, 35 years old, that's got some experience at the big, at the major college level. That's have competed for conference championships or national championship. Bring him in. If he doesn't, if he doesn't stay but 3 years, your program's better than that. Look at Billy Napier that just left Louisiana and go to Florida. He's coming in with credentials out the kazoo. Now, in all fairness, you watch his interviews and all. He's not a very flamboyant speaker.
Not at all.
But he's got the credentials of building a program, and I think that's what Scott Strickland wanted. There, somebody to come in and stay a while, put their program in, his program in place, and and make Florida competitive again. Troy is a little bit different situation. They have to play the big time D1 schools, but to get somebody, they don't have the money to pay the millions of dollars as the larger universities do. So you try to get lucky and find a guy like Adil Brown that came in that state 4 years, did a remarkable job. Where does he go? He moves down to West Virginia, and he's building a program there. And I just watched he's going to get a decent bowl game this year. They lost a couple probably that they should have won, but they didn't. That's always in the transition. So, look at somebody that may be on his staff that had been at Troy that he took with him, or in that, I think in that realm, somebody that understands recruiting and coaching at the level that Troy in the Sun Belt right now, as opposed to where he is in the ACC.
Yeah, and you bring up Billy Napier going to Florida, and tremendous coach. I mean, what he's done at Louisiana, and we don't call it Louisiana Lafayette. I've heard they get mad at you now if you say Lafayette in there. Just say Louisiana, but 39-12 there. And of course, my big thing is whenever a coach, from one of the group of five jumps up to a big job like a Florida, one where they're expecting to win championships. They're not there for 8-4, 9-3. He thought Dan Mullen was on that track, but I think from what I can see and what I've read, you see that a lot of it was recruiting. The recruiting had fallen off, so that's always my not a question, but maybe a concern. Can he recruit at that level? I mean, he recruited well at Louisiana, or like Dan Mullen recruited well at Mississippi State, but then he got to Florida. He wasn't bringing the 5 stars that you need to compete with Alabama and Georgia. Billy Napier, though, for you, when you that hire, what sticks out to you, and how impressed, or what do you think about that hire?
Well, see, I was fortunate enough I read the recruiting office at Troy, who won a national championship. I worked I was a number 2 guy at Florida State under Brad Scott in the recruiting office where we were competing for national championships. And I read the recruiting office at Ole Miss. So I'm very familiar with the rules and what it takes to do that. The biggest change, though, Phillip, that has happened that allows guys like the Troy coaches and or Billy Napier to do either one is the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the supplement for it's what I call free agency in college. It's just like it is in the NFL. That you can go find these kids, and normally when a coach leaves, I just read tonight where when Coach Ogeron left LSU, there's going to be 8 or 10 guys jump in the portal, including Max Johnson, their starting quarterback. So now whether they can hire somebody to retain that before it happens, that's another thing. But that's the way that Coach Napier can do something immediately in Florida. And I just, in my mind, I take down to start with, if I'm rebuilding, I got 25 scholarships. I'm going to devote 15 of those to high school kids to build a program. But I'm going to leave about 10 slots open immediately for transfers. Because, look, there's a ton of difference. I don't care if he's a 5-star evaluated high school athlete at 18 than a kid that's already played 2 years at a major college, 21 years old. He's already been in the weight program 3 years. He's more mature. He knows what he wants, so he wouldn't be transferred out. There's a lot of pluses to that. Basically it's the way you handle it. But I think that is something new that came along much after the time I left the industry. So I think there's a chance. He's got a great track record. of organization and putting guys on the ground to evaluate the players he wants to come to Florida. And I can bet tonight he's probably in Texas talking to that quarterback they got.
Yeah, and with Dan Mullen too, how at that went, because it was kind of shocking because the first 2 years they won 10 plus games, and last year the closest team to come to Alabama last year it was in the SEC championship game, but lost. He was 2-9 last 11 against Power 5 opponents, and then obviously the recruiting and just the way this year went. From you seeing watching Florida this year and in the last couple of years with Dan Mullen, what do you think went wrong there with him?
See, something happened to him, Phillip, and I've talked to numerous people down there, in and around the program, some in the media and some that are coach down with Dan Mullen. And something happened, and I can almost pinpoint it. It was last year, the Missouri game. You recall they had the fight right before halftime. Florida went in, and he comes running back out on the field and trying to get the crowd involved in the scuffle and all. Something happened to him emotionally. And I don't know, Urban Meyer even made the comment to Buddy Martin, a friend of mine that does a sports talk show there, that Dan is not the same Dan Mullen he knew when he worked for him, and they won two national championships there. So who knows about why? But the credit he gets for the losses is lack of recruiting, a lack of interest in recruiting. So and that will get you. It's already proven that Alabama, Georgia, and there are others out there that are in that same mode. If you don't recruit for the top players in the country, and Florida is no reason. University of Florida sitting in the state that has 220 or 250 D1 players, and everybody else in the country comes in and cherry picks 1 or 2 out of. There's no reason you can't get 10 or 15 5-star players out of the state of Florida, and you are the state university. And I think that's what Napier is looking for. I think that's what he'll try. But also, he'll take his show on the road and go to Texas and Louisiana and other places he's recruited from, where he knows the kids, and he's got, in essence, more to offer than he did when he was at Louisiana. So I think the Dan Mullen situation, in all fairness, from everything I've learned and probably assess his position and what happened to him, he really wants to go to the NFL and just coach quarterbacks. He might take an offensive coordinator's position, but his ideal job, he's got $12 million now, so he can afford to pick and choose where he wants to go. Would not surprise me to see him in Jacksonville over there sitting with Urban Meyer one day. He'd be in the box and he'll be calling the plays for Urban. And from what I've seen from Jacksonville, they need him.
They need a lot. They need a lot of things with the Jaguars at this moment. They'll be hitting free agency. We talked about portal. They'll be hitting some free agents and some draft this year, trying to fix what's going on there. And you talk about again Billy Napier going to Florida, and then he kind of like I like to transition that to LSU. And for him, I mean, he can probably go into Louisiana and get some kids now. What do you think? With Louisiana, they want to keep a lockdown on their in-state, prospects, because there is a lot of talent there. And and before I got on with you here, before we got connected, I did see now that they may be going after Brian Kelly. I mean, then of course the Lincoln Riley stuff was rumored, and he's going to USC. LSU was one of the first ones to announce parting ways with Coach when they announced they were going to part ways with Coach O after the Florida game. So it's just kind of like they feel like they've kind of gotten behind everybody else now on this coaching search thing, and kind of be intriguing to see who they do get.
Well, I'm surprised they've waited this long, but I'll tell you probably why. LSU's got too many other problems in the athletic department. They've got all those federal lawsuits for sexual harassment and all the things that Les Miles left and Coach Orgeron didn't clean up. And Coach Orgeron, I think, has been tagged for holding on to some of that paperwork. I don't know what the degree of that. I understand it's at least 12 cases, federal cases that's got to go through. They got a basketball problem with the coach there that's, the NCAA has been looking very closely at their program as well. And there's just a lot of administrative problems in there. It probably, that was, if you recall, the rumors that was offered Lincoln Riley the day he took off from Oklahoma to come over to LSU to talk to him was like $96 million for 8 years. That's $12 million a year. If somebody close to the program in the financial side told me to clean up all the problems they have and hire a named coach, it cost them $100 million. Where they've got that kind of money or not, I don't know. If they don't, maybe they got good credit and they can go to the bank borrowed. I don't know how they can handle it, but I'm surprised they haven't nailed somebody down yet. The only really high-profile active coach that we know was in the loop is Lane Kiffin. That's still out there. Now, whether he's interested in the LSU job or not, I have no idea. Ole Miss is really unloaded the bank. They've offered $8.2 million in a house, about a $3.4 million house to stay. And however, in Lane's defense, he had 26 seniors this year, and very few of all those guys were. A bunch of those guys were starters. And that means of course, he loses Corral. But that means basically he's got to start over with his offense for next year. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Lane jump out there. I know he was tied to the Miami job, which is not even open yet. But I understand that the crystal ball from Oregon may have an inside track on that one if it does come over, if it's how many guys. So there's still some stuff circulating out there yet. But as we opened the conversation about the early signing period, these guys can't afford to wait, another day or two, and they're going to be lost completely this early signing period. The athletes you could get in it.
Yeah, talking about Miami, Manny Diaz still is the head coach as we record this, and recording this Monday evening. But going into there when this drops, you would think now with the early signing period and everything else going on, if you were going to move on from a coach and you haven't done it lately, you're kind of waiting too long. I mean, you need to probably go ahead and do it as soon as the season's over with if you're going to do it.
I don't know who gets there first. If a top prospect is out there, he's got 5 or 6 offers, and your school is still not hired the new head coach yet, you're going to lose that one slot against that one guy. And how many times have we seen, 1 or 2 great players on your program, if you're able to, to entice him to come to your school, can make a season for you. Normally it revolves around a skill player, quarterback, or wide receiver, or running back. But if that's why they fight and scratch to get there, to maintain a hold on those top prospects that have committed to that school. I think Florida lost 8 or 10 decommitments over the last 2 weeks after they fired Dan Blunt. They down to like 4 is all they have. I just heard that number later today. So that means the first people he's going back to are those guys that committed to Florida first, because he knows they've already had some kind of emotional contact with the university, like the school. However, it'll be a different system coming in, but he'll have to go sit down with those families and explain that to them. So I mean, it's really a evaluation process, and the coach has got his hands full on time right now, or lack of, to get that program salvage what they can out of this signing period early, and then certainly try to bolster it between them. That's why I think the transfer portal will be so important to them, particularly the second signing period, and or make way in the junior college market for a year or two to see if he can bridge that gap between what Dan Mullen was doing and, of course, what his program is.
Yeah, and kind of transition to Saturday, the games have been played when we just spent 18 minutes talking about coaches. and it was a good weekend, but SEC, and of course I want to lead off with what happened in the Iron Bowl. Alabama winning 24-22. I mean, I think Auburn had plenty of opportunities to kind of end that and pull off the upset, but Alabama did come back and with that opportunity to win the game. Just watching that, just what was the biggest thing that stuck out to you between Alabama and Auburn on Saturday?
Well, it was a minute 47 seconds and 97 yards and no timeouts, and they drive the ball down and score. Alabama does to tie it up. Now Auburn outplayed them, really 50 minutes out of the 60 that they played. They did. They all played extremely well. Look, the line going in there was at 20, so I mean they was expected all the money guys were expecting Alabama to run, rib shot over it without any doubt. And even though Coach Saban knows that everybody's going to give Alabama their best game, Alabama still, Phillip, has a problem blocking with the center guard and tackle on the right side. And that worries me for Georgia, in the Georgia game, because they got those 3 beamers up front that nobody's been able to block so far this year. Now, I will give Auburn credit. They did something on the defensive side that nobody else has done. They rushed the defensive ends not to get to the quarterback on the first move, but to contain him. They rushed him wide, tried to keep him in the pocket and let the inside guys, the linebackers, get to him, and they did. They got to him several times. You can imagine then what Georgia's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've already seen that. So Alabama's going to have to be very imaginative with their offense early in the game, I think, even to the point where Coach Saban, if he wins the toss, he's going to defer to the second half. I'm just saying they need to remember this. Georgia has not been behind any more than one series the whole year. And I just wonder how they would react if Alabama jumped out there and scored a couple of touchdowns early in the first quarter. Would they be able to adjust and, and make things happen, or do they get rattled real quick because they've never been behind like that this year? So I think it's going to be intriguing. I say it basically for this week coming up, Alabama learned a lot about themselves this past week. They know where the strength. And if you remember, they played 3 or 4 wide receivers. I didn't know who those kids were because they hadn't played all year. So I think you look for some new faces in there. I don't know whether they'll do it with the offensive line or not, but they're going to do it particularly if Brian Robinson's leg is so much reported today that probably a pulled hamstring if he's not ready to go. I look for Trey Sanders to try to take that slot. I thought he did a good job when he was in there. They don't, for some reason, don't have a lot of confidence in him, but it's going to be a very interesting. I think the game is going to be won and lost on the sideline this weekend. Who can outmaneuver who? I think Alabama. I think we'll see some different stuff from Alabama we had seen. And all the listeners out there don't think that Alabama just started on getting ready for Georgia this week. They've been getting ready for Georgia for at least 3 or 4 weeks, and I think they're going to come up and show a different wrinkle. And I don't say that they can beat Georgia, but I think it's going to be a very competitive ball game.
Yeah, on Iron Ball, I want to ask you this question because this is what I've been thinking about, after the game. And I really, about an hour after it, I was thinking, when they go on that first overtime, Alabama scores first, and then Auburn gets the ball, then they score. You've got a hobbled quarterback. You're obviously the inferior team talent-wise. The longer that game goes, and we saw it favors Alabama. Just from look, Brian Harsin, that's a tough job. You're in the moment. I'm not trying to question them too much here, but maybe when you score that touchdown, go for 2. Just, you're 6-5. You have nothing to lose. Just go ahead and just try to win the game there. Obviously, they had a good 2-point play that we saw 2 possessions later that they probably could have used right there, would have caught Alabama off guard. Just, your thoughts on that. Maybe Brian Harsin, like I said, I'm second guessing playing Monday morning quarterback here, but just maybe should have went for 2 there instead of just trying to extend the game and giving Alabama more opportunity to win the game as they did.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, but none of us know what's going on in practice that week. We don't know the mindset, that late in the game. What about the fatigue factor? Are they sure they're going to get a good snap from the shotgun? I mean, there's so many things in a critical ball game like that most coaches are so conservative. They'll hold just what you're talking about, hold that play in their mind to a more opportune time. It is, and sometimes it costs them a ball game. Even to the point, but they can defend that by saying, "Hey, we didn't have a good week. I didn't have a lot. I had the wrong guy in there. Our running back coach didn't substitute the right time." There's 100 reasons you could use. Look, I spent a lot of time in a lot of good programs on the sideline, and you just be amazed sometimes the thought process that goes on. In the conversation that goes on, in the arguments that go on sometimes with assistants, with the head coach. I mean, it's not many things I had witnessed in my career that they can win or lose a ball game for you. I mean, that's literally the truth. So, we can sit back and see it real easy to sit back and say, hey, why did you do this or why did you do that? I can almost guarantee you when those things happen, there was a reason the coach had in his mind that it wasn't the right time to do that particular call in that circumstance.
Yeah, that was just kind of something I just thought about, just because just go ahead and you could try to win it there, because you see a lot of teams do that in that moment, just try to go for 2 and win that. And this year for Auburn, look, they were 6-2. There was talk, I think, 8 games through that he maybe was being talked about coach of the year. They were playing well, but these last 4 ball games, they struggled offense the whole game against A&M, but against Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Alabama, you go up, you had decent leads there, and you weren't able to finish those games, and they finished 6-6. So, what's your overall thoughts on Brian Harsin? After now that going through year one.
Well, I think it was a transition. I had them at 8-4 at the beginning of the season. I thought they could at least get that much. Now I didn't count on Bo Nix going down. I thought the transfer from LSU, the big quarterback, did a reasonably good job. But it was obviously that number 3 they stuck in there was not ready to play yet. So I mean, it's the thing that was different about his program this year. We got no information during the week. We had a chance to cover his ball game, take out what they did, listen to his press conferences. But if you notice, he didn't give any information out, and that was by design. And if it worked for him, but I think in hindsight, I think some things will change for next year. I'll be interested to see if any assistant coaches change as well. Where Mike Bobo will stay as offense, or if they'll change the defensive coordinator. We'll just see how that goes in the off season. From everything I've read or seen, it looks like the recruiting is going to be right on par with where they've been. So I think it's maybe not fair to give him this first year in the transition. Because remember, he came from a long way away from Auburn, Alabama.
Yes, he did.
You come from Boise, Idaho. That's about as far in the Northwest you can go as far as football is concerned. So let's see it this time next year. Now I'll say this: if he's 6-6 or 7-5 this time next year, there's going to be some people scratching their head. I promise you.
Yeah, we know how people up in Auburn, the powers to be,
that's right,
can be with that. Just overall looking at the SEC this year, you had some, and coach of the year interesting because you could probably say, well, Kirby should get it because he had the best team, but usually don't work like Saban. Nick Saban hasn't got that award a lot because I think a lot of people look at said you got all the 5 stars, you should be really good. What Sam Pittman's done at Arkansas, winning 8 games this year. Then, of course, we talked about Lane Kiffin going 10-2. I think Mike Leach did a fantastic job this year, turning around Mississippi State. Just, coach of the year and just, some overall storylines. This, as we know, we go into the SEC championship game this Saturday. What's kind of been some stuff that stuck out to you with the conference this year?
Well, I really think Lane Kiffin winning 10 games in the regular season. Of course, remember, I was on that staff, not with him, but I was on with Billy Brewer there. And I know the mindset of those people. I understand, the makeup of the program and who supports the program. Winning 10 in the regular season, the first time in the history of the school. And that, goes transition across Johnny Ball, David Cutcliffe with Eli Manning. I mean, we just go down the list of all the great programs that's been there, and he's able to pull that off. So, I think that's one. That's one certainly. Sam Pittman won more games this year than won 3 combined. I don't know how you can neglect that in the Southeastern Conference. I'm putting those 2 right there. So one of the 2, I think, will win it, mainly because of what they accomplished. Not so much Kirby winning winning the East, but certainly got a great chance to win the conference and make it to win the national championship. And of course, Alabama's Alabama. They've been there, not quite as good as they have been performance-wise. Had two games this year, Florida and Auburn. They win by only 2 points. A lot of people scratching their head on that. So I think those 2, historically, have already been there before. I think either Kiffin or Sam Pittman probably win. It probably Sam because his personality is just down home, good old country boy. Y'all come on to Arkansas and let's play football and have a good time. And he's done it well. He takes it in stride. You don't see him, jumping on the officials or that. He understands where he is and what he took over, but he's been able to accomplish a great deal. So I'm gonna say probably Sam, but I'll say it'll be between Sam Pittman and Lane Kiffin.
Of course, you've been part of it, obviously on staff at Ole Miss and then being there in Mississippi. I don't think a lot of people realize the heated rivalry between those 2 schools, Mississippi State, yes. Ole Miss. I mean, nationally, of course, you hear about Ohio State, Michigan, and Auburn, Alabama, as the top rivalries. but it's someone, like I said, that's lived in the state and also, been on the coaching staff, being part of that rivalry. Oh, how intense is it between those two programs?
Oh, but I think, I'll be honest with you, normally the head coach sets that tempo. Lee and Mike Leach have gotten along extremely well. I mean, they've done numerous interviews together across the state for different franchises or for different business to raise funds for different causes. They've set a different standard. I think that particularly, with Dan Mullen was at Mississippi State, when Hugh Freeze was at Ole Miss. It's a different attitude. Now, when they line it up, kick it off, they go after it pretty hard. And one of the reasons they don't get the publicity nationally, because they're two smaller schools, in the least populated state almost in the country. And I think that's part of the reason right there. But the good thing is they play on Thanksgiving night. They get national TV across the country. People get a chance to view those two programs. And, of course, Leach and Lee Kiffin both came to the respective schools with a track record, either on the field or in some cases with Lee, he had a track record off the field as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons why that, but I do sense, having been to those games and been to practice sessions at both universities, it's not the rivalry had turned into a hate rivalry. It's healthy right now. Now that could get out of hand in a heartbeat. I have seen them fight before first kickoff. I mean that was some of the old. That was Jackie Sherrill, for example, was at Mississippi State. That it was vicious in those days, but that has settled down and I think that's for the better. I'll be honest with you.
Lastly, before I let you go, of course, this is recorded Monday night, as I said, but we are I'm releasing this on a Tuesday morning. Of course, the latest college football playoff rankings will come out on Tuesday evening. Just for you, who would you like to see as the top four when they release the new rankings?
Well, I'm going to tell you who I think it's going to be. I think probably Georgia, it'll be Georgia, then I think Michigan's will probably end up number 2. Probably Notre Dame and Alabama. Now, if Alabama gets beat, which is a good chance, they're going to go in an underdog in that game. If they get beat, then they'll drop out completely. They won't keep them in there with 2 losses. So, I think probably Oklahoma State, if they can win, if they win this conference championship. I don't look for Cincinnati to be there. I know there's a big push. It has been. But, of course, I'll give you my opinion. I watched Cincinnati play this past week on Friday night. They won. They won 12 games. They beat Notre Dame. They only lost Notre Dame's guy. I'm not impressed with the organization. And I don't think they passed the eye test, if that's part of the evaluation. They got some good athletes, but they don't appear to be very disciplined. The system is kind of basic. Here's the final straw. Just remember for you listeners out there, Phillip, that the bowl committee, the playoff committee, 13 people make this choice. It's nothing to do with NCAA. It's nothing to do with the bowl system. This is just the committee that finds they think the best 4 teams. But that's not the only criteria. They look at the strength of schedule. They look at the potential viewing audience. And here's what I'll give you. If it comes down to Cincinnati, for example, and Oklahoma State, which team, if they end up number 4, which team would have more viewers?
Oh, yeah.
I would say Oklahoma State in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Not Cincinnati, because the size of the school and all. And I think that may play a role. Now, you'll never get the committee to say that. I can promise you that. But that plays a role because that is obviously a money-making group that needs the top viewing audience in the country. That's why they'd love to have had Oregon in there to get that West Coast audience. Without the West Coast audience, they won't get many people out there watching the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be everything, from about from mid-continent back, from Oklahoma, Texas back this way from there eastward. So those are the intricacies I think that the average fan just doesn't pay that much attention to. I don't care where they go. They'll take a one-loss team over an undefeated Cincinnati team, I think, every time.
Yeah, I remember after the first ranking release this year, I went on somebody else's show, and I said, we always got to remember it's a TV product. too, and TV ratings, and that kind of can dictate some things because there's maybe a time where there was Ohio State or one of the bigger teams you may argue shouldn't have got there, but that name brand does help them out a little bit because at the end of the day, it's ESPN, it's college football, it is a TV product, and that kind of I do wonder does creep in the minds of the people on the committee.
That's true. That's what it's all about, and it's a shame, and I kind of understand where the committee is. They don't want to put all the criteria out there because you got loyal fans to those teams that finish 5, 6, or 7. They think their team ought to be there, but they don't put the complete criteria out there for selection. That's why you continue to get complaints about that. But you know what? There's supposed to be 64 teams in the NCAA basketball playoff. They go down to 68. They have the play-in games. They still get number 69 and 70 fussing. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many you got or where you go. You got some that's not going. That will be disgruntled.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting. I always look forward to the rankings. We only got 2 more of them till we find out who are going to be the 4 in the playoffs. So the season went by really, really, really too quickly, as it always does. And Coach Howell, I always appreciate you coming on the show, giving your knowledge of college football, what you see, what you think is going on. I always appreciate you taking the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Always be my pleasure, Phillip. I certainly enjoyed it. You have a good night.